So raise your hand if you've ever heard a Christian imply that being a Christian goes hand in hand with being a conservative. Yeah, I have too. Now, have you ever heard someone imply that being a Christian means you need to be a liberal? Of course you have. I have been uncomfortable with these attitudes since I was in high school, and it's gotten a lot worse lately. Nowadays, everything is an issue and every issue is polarizing. There's no room for dialogue. We are placed in opposition to each other, and then we yell and cancel and demonize each other. And the sad thing is that Christians are not taking our guidance from Christ in all this. All too often, we are taking cues from our culture, from the world. We adopt conservative or liberal positions right down the line without thinking about what Scripture says. Well, we might have a simple verse or two that we think is clear and simple. And then we seek division in the body. I don't need to tell you that this is bad. But what's the solution? This video is about a way out of this mess. And it may be something like they used in the early church. Dr. Barry Johnson came up with a tool that helps us to manage issues where both sides seem to be irreconcilable. The first thing Johnson says we need to understand is what kind of an argument we are in. There are two different kinds. There is the kind where either you are right or you are wrong. Let's call these either-or disagreements. In these instances, the purpose of the argument is to establish who is right. Theoretically, these arguments are resolved once the truth is established. Here are some examples of either-or arguments. Is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? How long was the war between Britain and Zanzibar? How long can a cockroach live without a head? If there was an argument, it's over when we know the answer. Scientifically, it's a fruit. Practically, it's a vegetable. 38 minutes. And several weeks. Sometimes we get into arguments where there isn't a simple right and wrong answer, even though we think there is. Here are some examples. Is social media good or bad? Shall we go to Europe or save up for a new kitchen? Do we develop the land or leave it for recreation? Liberal or conservative? And the 1,000 arguments that come out of that polarity. It is vital that people understand which sort of disagreement they are in. When you think you are in an either-or argument, but it's really a both-and disagreement, you are, as Johnson says, arguing that inhaling is better than exhaling. Once you know that you're in a both-and argument, it's hard for people to give up their position, because they are right. Exhaling is of vital importance. How can anyone not understand that? Barry Johnson has come up with a useful tool he calls polarity management. I know it sounds boring, but it's not. To illustrate how this works, let's look at the question, liberal or conservative? How can Christians best be the salt of the earth? I know many people will disagree with me here, but this question has no clear right or wrong answer. It is a both-and discussion that many have made into an either-or argument. Stop it! So, in Johnson's model, we put the two opposing but interconnected ideas, values, or approaches that make up the polarity. There we go. And then we can put in a higher purpose and our deepest fear. These answer the question, why is it so important that we deal with this conflict, and why we need to do it well? I'd like to pull our higher purpose and our deeper fear from Matthew 5, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Christ told us to be salt in the world. He told us that we are to season, preserve, and to heal the world. He also said that if we aren't salty, we will be thrown out onto the sidewalk. Serious stuff. So our higher purpose is to be obedient to Jesus and be the salt of the earth. Our deeper fear lies opposite of the higher purpose. If we fail to be salt, we are fit only to be cast out and ground into the dirt. All Christians, both liberal and conservative, have the same higher purpose and the same deeper fear. In the middle of it all, we have these quadrants. The upper quadrants describe the positive side of both options, respectively, and the lower quadrants describe the dangers of focusing too much on only one side. Remember the inhale-exhale polarity. Barry Johnson's method is to have a group of people populate the quadrants through honest discussion. If the people are honest, or the participants diverse, they will discover that all the quadrants will be filled. Since I am both liberal and conservative, I consider myself qualified to fill out the quadrants for illustrative purposes. Of course we have collective responsibilities and we need to work together to accomplish all kinds of important things. Of course personal responsibility is important. And who would argue that personal freedom is not important? And who would argue against civil liberties and individual rights? These are all good things, like inhaling and exhaling. And, I might argue, some important ways that Christians can be salt of the earth. But there are important downsides to each. Like just inhaling, we can overfocus on one pole to the neglect of the other, and this is bad. An overemphasis on collective responsibility can be expensive, and an overfocus on individual responsibility can result in poverty that is not the fault of the poor. An overemphasis on civil and individual human rights can have people continuously suing each other. An overfocus on personal responsibility, which is linked to an emphasis on law and order, can result in mass incarceration. On the other hand, we can remove responsibility from individuals altogether, and that's not good. A free market is good, but we can't expect people and corporations to do the right thing. It's not part of human nature. But we can't regulate everything, but some things certainly can be regulated a little more. Choice is good, but so is life. Like inhaling and exhaling are interdependent, so too are the liberal and conservative polarities. One cannot exist without the other, because each is a necessary corrective to the other. I hope you can see that all things being equal, both liberal and conservative Christians can be aimed towards saltiness, and both want to avoid being trodden underfoot. So should Christians be liberal or conservative? Yes. Cautiously and discerningly either, or neither. For Christians to be salt and light in the world, we will need to abandon rigid adherence to just one side of the political spectrum. We will have to see that there are two legitimate biblical realities at play here. Obviously, to sort out what we believe to be the best Christian position in the thousands of issues that arise from this polarity, we need to sit down and have a serious and humble conversation. In a future video, we will discuss how we deal with disagreements and how to seek the leading of the Spirit in these kinds of conflicts. What we have is people treating both and arguments like they are either or. They accept the principle that if I am right, the one who disagrees with me is necessarily wrong. When you Christianize this, I am on the side of God. And in opposing me, you are opposing God. And you know what that means. And the neighbors are watching, and they're not seeing saltiness. I think Jesus knew that we have this tendency to polarize and demonize. And rather than getting all complicated and coming up with a polarity management system, he just told us one thing: love your enemies. That about covers it, doesn't it? Thank you, and we'll see you next time.